and has had lots of good reviews and all the rest of it. And I've given lots of talks on it, but I've never actually turned it into a course. So you're going to be the first subjects of the course, and let's hope, well, I know you will enjoy it, because really what we're talking about, is something which is very important. Mental health issues are rising up to the top at the moment, because there's so many different things, which are going on in the world, and people are feeling overwhelmed, with lots of fears, lots of concerns. And these don't have to turn into depression or stress or anxiety, but for the majority of people, they do, because they haven't necessarily had an opportunity to take a step back, look at things more objectively, and connect with some very important parts of themselves which they may have forgotten about. And so, in a way, this course is about helping us to wake up. It's about helping us to realize we've got lots of opportunities to learn and grow. We've got lots of inner strength, lots of inner power, lots of wisdom, lots of insights, lots of intuition, all waiting to be discovered, all waiting to be expressed. And so I'm hoping, we will be able to do some of that, during this period, these 3 sessions when we're going to be together. So before we start, I think it would be nice just to relax and to get into the moment. And so we need to make sure that everybody has
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I think he's mute himself.
All right. So can you hear me now?
Yes, John.
Good. Thank you. I'm just saying, Nina is a wonderful person in her own right and does lots of good things. And it's always a pleasure to be with her and work with her. So now you can hear me. We're going to do a relaxation exercise in order to focus ourselves, let go of the things we've been doing, and just come into the moment. So if you'd like to start doing some slow, deep, gentle breathing, making sure your legs are uncrossed and your feet are on the floor and your hands are open on your thighs. And so breathing in slowly, deeply and gently through the nose, filling the lungs from the bottom to the top, and then holding the breath for the count of 5, and slowly releasing through the mouth. So breathe in your own time. And now just become aware of the effects of that breathing on your body. So just notice how the body is beginning to relax. Notice how the tension is flowing away and all the muscles are becoming relaxed. The jaw muscles, the shoulder muscles, the back, the torso, the arms and the hands, the legs and the feet. Everything is becoming relaxed. So just observe this feeling of being relaxed. And now notice how you're beginning to calm down generally. Observe how your thoughts are slowing down. And you're feeling more peaceful. You're feeling more present. You're in the moment. All feels good in your world, in this moment in time. You feel as one. You are the witness. You are the observer. You are the one who is in control of this body and the mind. And now, in this state of calmness and peace and relaxation, just ask yourself, why have I joined this course? So just think about that for a minute. What do I want to learn? How do I want to be in the future? So ask yourself the question and listen to the answer. You're tuned into your intuition. You're tuned into your higher self. You're tuned into the one who knows you really well. You're tuned into the one who wants to help and protect you. The higher part of yourself. So now, if you have pen and paper to hand, just write down what you want to achieve, what you want to receive, what you want to learn. And then if some of you could put one or two of your thoughts into the chat box. It doesn't have to be a long sentence. It could be one word, like happiness. Yeah, so Caroline wants stability. Milan is wanting joy. Drew is wanting peace, and so is Sam. And then Linda is wanting emotional good health to recover from post-traumatic stress disorder, and Michelle wanting a shift in energy and inner balance. So yeah, thank you. A peaceful life. Yes, great. So really all these things are part of you already, actually. You've experienced them before, which is why you're wanting them again now. And they are achievable. And when we're in that state, then we will feel happier, we will feel better in ourselves. And then we're able to handle things so much better. And then, Jem, I'd like to have techniques to become unstuck in the emotional pain I've been experiencing for several years, and to be in peace and joy again. Great. More stability and lightness. Okay, thank you. So we've got lots of things there, and hopefully during this period of these 3 sessions, you will experience these things again, and it won't be through luck, it won't be through chance, it will be through knowledge, it'll be through awareness, it will be through understanding, because these things are very important and we can take them for granted, but once we lose them, which we often do, then you know, we need to find a way back. And you know, in my particular case, as I mentioned in the book, I had 2 periods of depression. Once when I was younger, and I was overwhelmed by different things happening in my life, a tough job as a prison governor, a young family, trying to juggle the 2, not getting on so well with my wife at the time, and no support, and I, you know, feeling really hopeless and helpless. This is what can happen, you know, when we do get really stressed and really depressed. And for me, the thought came, just one little cut of the wrist and it'll all be over and I'll just be at peace. I won't have any more problems. And for some weeks I was going around, you know, imagining cutting myself. I never told anybody. And then one day I went to the doctor, because obviously it's not a good thing to think or to feel. And then the doctor gave me prescribed antidepressants, and I took them home. And now this is where I have to say, and I'll emphasize this again in a minute, I'm not a medical expert. I'm talking on the basis of my own journey, my own discoveries, all the things which have helped me. And this course is there designed in a way to complement whatever you're doing. It's not there to undermine any medical help you're getting. It's not there to undermine any therapies you may be undertaking. And I'm not suggesting that you do any of the things that I did, because we're all unique individuals. We've got to find our own way of dealing with things and our own way of managing things productively. So this next bit, I'm not recommending you do it, but in my particular case, I went to take the antidepressants and got as far as filling the glass with water, about to put the tablet in my mouth, and a voice inside, yeah, I would say it's my intuition. Now, I wasn't quite sure what it was at the time, said, don't do it. you know, there is another way, there is a better way than taking drugs. So for me at that time, I listened to that voice and I ended up flushing the tablets down the toilet and started to explore ways of shifting my mood and improving things. And I started off by reading books, and the first one was Louise L. Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. So if anybody has never read it, then I would strongly suggest that you do. It is a lifesaver, and millions of copies of it have been sold now over probably 30 years. And she was somebody who was in a very desperate state herself, and she tells her story, how she overcame it, and then she gives, you know, all these wonderful tools and techniques for managing life much better. And also at the back, she gives the emotional connection to all the illnesses, because all illnesses are psychosomatic. There's an element of our own psyche in there where we've created the illness through the way we've thought, the way we've behaved and things like that. And this does include actually depression, anxiety and stress. I mean, if anyone told me at the time, you know, you're creating this yourself, you're doing this to yourself, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been very polite. I told them to go away, that they were mad. Because, thank you, Nina, for putting the book title in. Yeah, because when you're in the middle of it, you don't want somebody telling you, you know, there is a better way. You could, you know, you are creating it yourself. But anyway, I was fortunate. I started exploring things, self-help books, and there's millions out there. Another one I'll recommend at this moment in time, because, you know, the Brahma Kumaris is a spiritual university, but that means studying things and making use of all the insights and the wisdom which is outside, you know, in the world. If it contributes to and helps us in our progress, then I think it's very good. Excuse me, I'm being a bit spontaneous here. I have got a PowerPoint and everything lined up, but I'm going with the flow. So the other book I would strongly recommend people to read would be Loving What Is by Byron Katie. So Loving What Is, Byron Katie, and basically it's a deep spiritual practice which we will cover later on in the course. But while we're talking about important books, then I must, you know, add that one. And the final one I will recommend, because again, I think it's really important, is this one, Lost Connections by Johann Hari. Lost Connections, Johann Hari. So, you know, when you start exploring, you'll find, well, they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. There's everything out there for you. If you're open to it, if you want to learn, if you want to grow, if you want to change, if you want to become a better version of yourself. And so there's lots out there. And the other thing that's out there, and again, I may as well mention it now, I'll mention it at the end as well, is to complement the book, Breaking Through the Darkness, there is a website called breakingthroughthedarkness.com. So maybe Nina will put that in as well, breakingthroughthedarkness.com. And again, if you go on there, there's loads of inspirational quotes. There's loads of good books like the ones I've just been recommending. And there is a very good video section. There's about 10 or 12 videos including one of Daddy Yankee, one by Shivani, for those who know of her, one by Eckhart Tolle. All the spiritual teachers, you know, they've all spoken about things like depression and anxiety and stress. So there's lots out there. So that website actually is a good one to go to. It's like a one-stop shop. It's all free. You don't have to buy the book or anything to go on it. And yeah, so there we go. So that's by way of an introduction. And what I'm going to do now is start sharing with you a PowerPoint. I'm not going to always be on it, but a lot of the points we need to make will be on this once I can find it. Here we go. And I'll expand it. Oh dear. There we go. Well, so starting at the beginning here then, so breaking through the darkness, I've given it the subtitle, Learning to be Happy Again. Now, you know, that's quite interesting. Learning to be happy again. Why a title like that? And the reason for that is that we have been happy in the past. If we'd always been miserable and depressed, if it's a natural, normal state, then we wouldn't be aware of anything else and we wouldn't be bothered, actually. You know, so well, everyone's miserable and depressed. So yeah, so remember, why, if you're unhappy and miserable and depressed now, it's because you know you have been happier in the past. So that's a good thing to be aware of, isn't it? So whatever you're going through now, it's not going to last forever because it's not part of who you really are. As we will discover. So again, how, you know, you could say this is a very pretentious thing to say, how to defeat. Sorry, I put defeat in there twice. I'll correct that afterwards. How to defeat depression, anxiety, and stress. Now, most people would say, well, that's impossible, you can't defeat it. But I would say, yes, you can. And why? And the answer is, I've already given it in a way, is that depression, anxiety, and stress are not part of our original nature. We all love to be happy. We all want to be happy. That's who we are. Part of us, anyway, along with a love of peace and, yeah, a love for life. That's the normal, natural way. So, you know, we're not born depressed, we're not born anxious or stressed, not in most cases. It will happen if someone's, you know, had a previous birth where they've been, you know, quite upset and traumatized. Now, again, you see, I've said something which some people will say, what's he talking about? Previous life and things like that. What's all this about? So again, with all these things, if you have an open mind, you will find that there's lots of evidence about people or souls having previous births because, and I'm saying all this because we are adopting a spiritual perspective. Now that, again, is quite unusual because we're living in a world where people have forgotten or actually completely disagree with the idea that we're actually spiritual beings. We're living in a world where we're seen, thanks to the advances in science, as advanced animals. You know, we're part of the monkey, ape, etc. Expansion, if you like. We're at the top of the tree, but actually we're just another animal. Now, some people might say, well, and we've got bigger brains and things like that. So we're a brain in a body. And once that brain, you know, ceases to function, that's it. You know, you'll be finished forever, because, and then you'll just, like all other animals, will just turn to dust over time. So, you know, the spiritual perspective is not recognized. It's not actually part of the treatment plan of anybody who may be depressed. They will traditionally be offered drugs. They will be offered, hopefully, talking therapies, and maybe offered things like CBT, you know, in order to improve your current functioning, in order to enable you to manage things more effectively. And the solutions offered, you know, can make a big difference. There's no doubt about it. But they're not going to answer some of the really big questions that some of us have. You know, what's life all about? Why do I find life so meaningless and empty? Is this all there is to it? These are big questions. What's going to happen to me when I die? You know, if we don't have answers to those sorts of questions, then we're left in limbo. And however happy we might be in the here and now, there's going to be big clouds around us. And the older we get, the more those pressures and those clouds are going to sort of get deeper and darker, because help, I haven't got much longer left. And I haven't a clue where I'm going or really what I'm doing. So I would say a spiritual perspective is essential for us all, actually. And gradually, people now are beginning to realize that. I think people are realizing that once we dumped religion and all those sorts of things, I'm talking about in the West, a lot of the rest of the world is still following, you know, traditional religious practices and things like that. Not everybody. There is a shift from that through materialism and through science. People, you know, have been just sort of doing their own thing and enjoying their life and enjoying all the things which the world has to offer, and striving for success and striving to look good and have a wonderful car, you know, wonderful life, all external things. But yes, I was going to say, actually, yeah, by dumping all those other things, you know, belief in a God, following a religious tradition and things like that, we've actually thrown the baby out with the bathwater, as we would say in England. In other words, the baby is the most important thing in the bath. But if you're not careful, if you tip all the water in the bath out and you haven't taken the baby out and held on to the baby, then the baby could go down the river or down the sewage pipe or whatever, along with everything else. So yeah, so we've got into denial, we've got into forgetting, we've got into disconnecting. And this obviously has a negative impact on us. And we'll just be lost. And when we get lost, then you can say we end up in the dark. And when we're in the dark, it's quite scary. You know, we're feeling hopeless, we're feeling helpless, we're feeling lost, and depression in particular. I mean, it's bad enough being stressed and anxious, but if you go down the hole even further, you can end up in a dark tunnel where you feel absolutely hopeless and helpless and useless. And life becomes draining. You have no energy left for anything. It's a struggle even to get out of bed. You know, it can go that deep. And I have experienced some of that, fortunately not for so long, because a bit of me is naturally optimistic, and a bit of me is always looking for ladders. You know, a bit of me is always looking for lights. A bit of me is always looking for a way out of things. That's part of my personality, I think. But some people who don't have those sorts of interests or awareness, they get stuck down there and think that's it. So we need to take a step back with all of this. You know, we've got to look at it objectively. We've got to try and understand what's going on from an objective point of view, like the witness, like the observer. So when we were doing those breathing exercises, this is what we were doing. We were taking a step back, observing our breathing, observing the effect on our body, observing the effect on our mind, observing the effect on our feelings or our heart. So this really is very important.
I'm zooming.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Come in.
No. Well, to disturb you. Carry on.
Okay, so please make sure you're muted. Otherwise everybody will hear you. And
Sorry.
that's okay, no problem. Okay, so this is why we have a spiritual perspective. There is that note of caution, which I've already mentioned. There we go. Sorry about that. Yes, so as I say, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again, whatever I say is not intended as a substitute for psychiatric or medical help, counselling or other forms of treatment. It's an additional support. It's a new insight, a new way of thinking to complement all the other things. So, really, this spiritual perspective, which we're talking about now, on which the course is based, is about using our spiritual intelligence. So that word there is in italics. So spiritual intelligence actually is meant to be the highest form of intelligence. You know, there's your normal IQ, there's emotional intelligence, and then there's spiritual intelligence, which actually takes us beyond all the normal things which we think about into a more unlimited perspective, a more unlimited world. So, recognizing, for example, we're more than a body. You know, we have mind, body, and spirit exhibitions now, don't we, which makes these sorts of distinctions. We're called human beings, not human doings. We're not machines. We're not automatons. We are beings, and a being, it expresses itself. It just is. So for a minute, just experience being yourself in the body. So do the breathing again, slow and deep and gentle. And then just turn your attention within. And recognize the being in the body. The being that is separate from but connected to the body. And you can see this being on the screen of your mind as like a tiny dot of living energy, a little light, like a sparkling star. And this being that I am is eternal. I've always existed. And I always will. At this moment in time, I am in this physical body, which is like a vehicle or an instrument. Through this instrument, I'm able to speak. Through this instrument, I, the soul, am able to walk, hold things, feel things, enjoy things, experience things. This vehicle, this body is important. But one day it will go, and I, the soul, will move on. And that's okay. And I have within me lots of qualities, like kindness and gentleness and peace. I have lots of values like equality, cooperation, respect. And I have lots of powers. The power to tolerate, the power to face things. I am special. And everyone else in the world is also a soul, and everyone else is also special. But like many other people, I've forgotten who I am. But I know who I have been, and I know who I will be in the future. So just notice how you're feeling. Notice how you're feeling calm, you're feeling peaceful, you're feeling happier, more stable, more in balance. So this is what happens when we reconnect with ourselves as a spirit, as a soul. And then again, as we can see in the PowerPoint there, we be more aware of our conscience, our intuition, our willpower, our judgment, our wisdom. These are not things connected to the body. They're not generated by the brain. They're coming from deep within the being who I am. So this is the foundation of everything we're going to be doing. And this is why we're spending quite a lot of time talking about it, because once you know this, it gives you a foundation from which to rise up out of the darkness, because a lot of people are going through what's called the dark night of the soul. A lot of people are feeling overwhelmed. So the spiritual perspective can help. So moving on now. So the aim of all of this, hopefully, well, I know what it is, and it's up to us whether we achieve it or not, because we can do courses like this, but if we don't really want to change, then there'll be like water off a duck's back. It'll go in one ear and out the other. But if we make an effort, then we're going to achieve something. And so, the aim is to uplift, empower, and inspire us to be happy again through accessing our awareness. Awareness is so important, really. being aware of what's going on, aware of what's going on inside, first of all. That's the most important thing. Not looking out there and being aware of Joe Blogg's doing this, or so-and-so doing that, or somebody doing whatever. Not about criticizing and judging and complaining about other people. Awareness is about me, the soul, me, the personality. What am I thinking? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How can I improve? It's all about being aware, because if we're not aware, then we're switched off. If we're not aware, then we're going around with blindfolded. We can't see properly. And then we need to access our natural wisdom and our knowledge. So in terms of depression and anxiety and stress, it's good to have a basic understanding of what they are. So we'll be looking at the definitions. We'll be looking at the signs of these states of unhappiness, because that's what they are. Depression, anxiety, and stress are different forms of unhappiness. And it causes us pain, because we're actually going against our natural nature to be happy. So it's like a wound or a spear going inside us, And what we need to do is to recognize the signs, then understand the causes, because with understanding, we can then come up with solutions. We can take the pressure off ourselves and realize it's not all about me. There are other influences around us or around me which are having an impact. And actually, I don't have to react to them. I don't have to be overwhelmed by them. There are other things I can do. But until I understand what I'm talking about, until I understand what the causes are, and until I have some awareness of the solutions, then it's not so easy. So this course is about opening us up to solutions. And one of the key ways we do that is by going through a 4-step process. And the first step, which we'll be exploring today, is understanding the mind-body connection. So we'll be doing that in a minute. Second step is going deeper within and looking at what's going on in my mind. And really, we need to think positively. Now, again, that sounds, quite trite almost. Well, of course we do. But actually, it's a very deep subject. And most people aren't even aware that there is such a thing as a positive thought, because we're all conditioned, both biologically and also culturally, to think negatively. We're always on the lookout for things going wrong. We're always projecting into the future what will happen if all the anxiety comes up, all the fear comes up. And if we turn that on to ourselves, then, it's going to go in, disturb us and depress us. So that's a very important step. The third step is actually, which we've already been talking about a bit, but there's a lot more to it, is we need to change our consciousness and be soul conscious. So we'll be exploring that, and then connecting with the light. And that is, so we'll be going from ordinary consciousness to higher consciousness, which is really about being soul conscious, to supra consciousness. Supra consciousness is going beyond myself as a soul and connecting with a universal energy. And you can call that universal energy all sorts, but it's coming from one source. And once we're able to access that source, it's going to buoy us up, it's going to empower us, it's going to help us to cope much better with the things which are going on in the world at the moment. So those are the 4 steps. And here, just a little reminder, we're not born depressed, anxious, or stressed. We become depressed, anxious, or stressed. So that's reinforcing a point I made earlier on. Over time, we lose our happiness and peace due to various life experiences, or as I'm going to be calling them in a minute, influences. There are all sorts of influences on us. And yeah, so if we want to move on, we really need to accept this truth. You know, that I am actually a spiritual being, and I need to take responsibility for my life. I can't blame anyone else for anything. Quite often when we're stressed, anxious, and depressed, we're full of blame. You know, it's all their fault. If it wasn't for them, then everything would have been all right. And we have faced challenges, as we'll see, but it's how we deal with those challenges which makes all the difference. So if we can accept this truth that we are responsible and we can solve these things, then we'll start breaking through the darkness. And I've just noticed a spelling mistake there. Sorry about that. Breaking through the darkness. So you don't have to remind me of that one. Yes, okay. So the darkness will go, because the darkness really is connected with ignorance. So when we come into the light, when we turn on the light of awareness, the darkness automatically vanishes. So just like if you go into a darkened room, it's all quite scary, and you know, where do I find the switch and how do I get out of the room? I've just come in because I can't see the door now, you know, all that sort of thing. But as soon as you find the light, as soon as you turn it on, all that darkness has gone. You can see clearly, you can see where you're going, you can find your drink of water or whatever else it might be. So really, the whole thing is very exciting. Very exciting, very interesting. You can learn so much about yourself. And then in learning about yourself, you'll also learn about everyone else. Because in some ways, we're all going through similar things. We're all facing different challenges. We've all been hurt. We've all been depressed on occasions. We've all been stressed. We've all been anxious. And when you know yourself and what's caused it, and when you're more empathetic, you'll become more empathetic, you become more compassionate, and then you can become wise and you can offer help to other people. Because you say, yes, I've been there too. I know what it's like. I've managed to get out of it with help, and you can too. So we become an inspiration. And you are all inspiring anyway, and there's 33 of you, which is a good number for this time on a Monday evening. Yeah, you are already inspiring because you're on your journey, you're on your way. Otherwise, you wouldn't actually be here now. You would be either down the pub or having your tea or whatever. So it's really interesting, really good. So off we go on to the next one, definitions. So it's good to know what we're talking about, isn't it? So stress, we'll start off with depression, a mental condition characterized by feelings of severe despondency and dejection, typically also with feelings of inadequacy and guilt. Severe, not just a little despondent, but severely so. Dejected, deflated, like a balloon that's been pricked, all the energy's gone out of it. And also there'll be feelings of inadequacy. I shouldn't really be feeling like this. I can't help me feeling guilty. How could I? I've got all these responsibilities. I've got to look after my family. And there I am feeling so depressed. So you start piling on more and more negative messages, which actually push you down even further. So we have to be very aware of what's going on in the mind here. That's mind chatter. You know, somebody described it the other day as when I was listening to somebody, it's a barking dog. You know, the slightest thing, woof woof, yap yap, constantly going on, grinding us down. So very important then, if you can find a way of turning down the volume or even switching it off, because then you can start generating new, loving, kind thoughts to encourage yourself and empower yourself, rather than listening to this voice, which is really often from the past. So that's a bit about a definition of depression. Stress, fear-based reaction to feeling of being out of control due to excessive pressure. So again, key words there, fear-based. If we're in a state of fear, we're going to trigger off that fight and flight reaction in the body. And that fight and flight reaction involves things like adrenaline pumping through your system, cortisol thickening your blood, the muscles tensing up so that the veins get narrower, and the blood which you're pushing through, thickened blood pushing through these narrower veins and arteries, is going to cause you to have palpitations, chest pains, and if you keep on getting stressed, then maybe a heart attack or something. So that fear reaction, because of feeling out of control due to that excessive pressure, will have all sorts of consequences. And actually that fight and flight reaction is behind every negative thought that we have. It's behind most medical conditions. Because, you know, when we get stressed, we've got the cortisol, we've got the adrenaline, we've got the acid in our stomachs, you know, and all these things the body will react to. And then over a long period of time, as that Louise L. Hay book will demonstrate if you read it, all these feelings and all this stress will manifest in different sorts of illnesses. So very important. And again, notice that word there. We need to change the fear into something else, obviously, and we need to stop reacting to things. A reaction is an automatic, non-thinking way of dealing with things. If I react to anything, the outcome will not be as good as if I responded. Responded means stop and think, if only for a second, and come up with a better solution. That will make me feel better, that will make me feel more in control, and then the stress will go down. And then there's anxiety, and then again, you know, that's connected partly with the other things we've been talking about, but it's a state of persistent, excessive worries that won't go away. Even if there isn't a stressor around at the moment, you can just be worried generally about everything and everyone. You know, now, as a good friend of mine, you know, who's been a social worker and everything else, brought up a family, went to see her the other day. She's got plasters on her fingers and her thumb. Why? Because she's always anxious, always worried, takes on everybody's burdens, worried about this person, that person, and the other person. And then she starts picking at her skin and biting like this. And yet she's living, you know, a lovely life, lovely house, lovely husband, lovely car, you know, a nice garden overlooking some woodland. I mean, everything on one level is perfect. There she is, eaten up with anxiety. And I've known her a long time, and I've told her about all these things. It hasn't made any difference yet, because it's a habit. It's an habitual way of being. Stress can be a habit. And depression can be a habit too. You know, I'm depressed, I've always been depressed, I always will be depressed. What's the point? You know, and we just go around and around this cycle. It needs to be broken. It'll only be broken when we're open. That's a good phrase, I ought to remember that. I sometimes don't know what's going to come out of my mouth next. So that was one thing. I hadn't thought of that one. Here we go. So we've got to be broken to be open. Okay. And then there we go. So we've got some idea at least, haven't we, about the definitions. I need to look at the time actually. I hope this is all right. Let's stop for a minute and see if anyone's got any questions, because I've been rabbiting on here. How do I get out of this? Sorry. Oh, I know. Sorry. I've got to stop sharing, haven't I? How do I do that? Oh, it's all moved to the top. Stop share, there we go. Okay, so before we do any more then, are there any questions? Is this making sense? Am I on the right track? Can people give a little bit of feedback there?
It makes
in the chat box, please, because it's yeah, it's been recorded and it's better in the chat box if you don't mind. Because if you start speaking, then we have to get your permission afterwards to you know, put it online, because this will go online. So in the chat box is much better for everybody, please. Oh, good. So Jem says I'm making sense. Right. Thank you, Jem. Anyone else want to clarify anything I've said so far? Does it make sense to everyone else? Maybe if you've got your videos on, you can just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Anybody wants to do that? Everyone's got their cameras off, actually. Okay, so nobody's got any questions or anything so far. Right, there we go. Oh, so yeah, so there's lots of signs coming up. Yes, I'm making sense. Yeah, and then Annie say dealing with issues temporarily is difficult but possible. How to do it in the long term? Yes. And is there an order of depression, stress, and anxiety? That's a good question there. Is there an order? I think in a way they're separate, but they can be connected. So, you know, your stress can be brought on by excessive pressure. And if you don't sort it out, and if you start blaming yourself for everything, then it could tip into depression. Because there's an interplay between yourself and what's going on inside you and what's going on in the outside world. And if inside is sorted, then you're able to deal with outside more easily. If you're in chaos inside and you're anxious and you're stressed, then it's going to be harder to deal with these things on the outside, and then you could end up, you know, going down, collapsing down into depression. Thank you for that. Good. And yes, there are temporary solutions, but we're wanting long-term permanent solutions, which is why we're talking about defeating it, getting rid of it completely. So thank you. And now I'll go back to the sharing. Now I know you're okay with what I'm doing so far. This is really what we're doing. We're trying to understand ourselves, and we're trying to understand what it's all about. There we go. So what are the signs then of this unhappiness we've been talking about? There are feelings like feeling hopeless, feeling guilty, full of regret, feeling unlovable, unworthy, not good enough. These three in particular are, I think, the foundation of much unhappiness. And I have been dogged by these three most of my life until relatively recently, because when you feel unworthy, unlovable, and not good enough, your self-esteem is rock bottom, and you're so desperate for attention, you're so desperate for approval, you're so desperate to compensate for these feelings that you'll go anywhere and do anything to help people in order to feel better. So these often are connected with people pleasers, and I was a people pleaser and could never say no to anybody because I was afraid that if I did say no, I would get rejected, and then it would trigger off all these feelings of being unworthy, unlovable, and not good enough. So I think most of the world's problems actually come from this. Especially in the West, and especially because we have, we have in the past been part of the Abrahamic religions, the Muslim, the Jewish, and the Christian, which, has the understanding that we're all born sinners and that human beings naturally are bad rather than good. And, if you're born a sinner and you have to go to church and have your sins wiped away, and you're told God, Christ died for your sins, then it's quite a big burden to be carrying. And then it leads to, if you're that bad, you need controlling. And then it leads to fear and force. You must do this, you must do that, or whatever. A whole series of things reinforce that not feeling good enough. And it's behind a lot of stuff, behind the stress, behind the anxiety, and definitely behind the depression. There will be, what's the point? I'm no good, I'm useless, etc. And when we're feeling like that, then we're going to end up exhausted. We'll be lethargic. All our energy will be heavy, negative energy. And as I said before, it's even too much trouble to get out of bed. We're also likely to be irritable and angry with other people. Go away, leave me alone. All that sort of stuff, because we're like a wounded animal. Wounded animals, they snarl when you go near them. Even though you want to help them, you want to make them better, they'll snarl, they'll snap, they'll bite you. And of course, then you're going to end up not being able to sleep well. You'll be tossing and turning, full of all sorts of fears, all sorts of anxieties. And again, you'll not be able to concentrate very well. And then the other thing that can happen, you can either eat too much, you're suppressing all your feelings, you're stuffing your face, trying to cope with this stress, more chocolate, more cake, because you get an instant rush of energy and sugar fix, or whatever they call it. And, that helps you to keep going for a bit longer. The other way is to eat too little. I'm not really worth it. I'm not bothered. Any old thing will do for me. And once you start cutting down on your food, then you feel like needing or wanting even less food. And then you go into a cycle of self-hate and abuse, etc. So all these things really are very deep. And then we're likely to withdraw. That's the other thing. Don't want to see anybody. Don't want to talk to anybody. Go away. Leave me alone. The wounded animal again. And then, of course, we develop all sorts of aches and pains. And they'll be connected with everything else, connected with our feelings, connected with our diet, connected with maybe, you know, drinking too much, because again, you know, we'll drown our sorrows maybe by having another glass of wine, or maybe take drugs, anything to dull the pain inside. So there's lots of signs, and we can see them in others, and we can also see them in ourselves. So when we notice those signs, we don't want to be judging, we don't want to be condemning, we don't want to be blaming. We need to be compassionate. So compassion starts with yourself. Understanding yourself, accepting yourself, being kind to yourself. So that's a little bit about the signs. Moving on then, what are the causes? Now, of course, the causes of our unhappiness influences on the soul, because the soul is in the middle of it all. This is how I see it now. You know, we're looking at it from a spiritual perspective. The soul is there in this body. There are all sorts of external influences. Now, some of those are general ones, and these could be local as well as global. In fact, the two are very interconnected in our world now, because we're living in a global society, aren't we? And we can see the interconnection between things happening here and happening elsewhere. So now, we're, you know, from what's happening in Ukraine, we're suddenly discovering, you know, most of our wheat has come from there. Most of our sunflower oil has come from there or Russia. And the supplies are cutting out or are being reduced. Now, you would never have put the two together and associated it with war, would you, in the past? But now, you know, there's the whole economic scene where the rich are getting richer and the rest of the population are being squeezed. And now many people are having to choose between eating and heating. Unbelievable in one of the richest countries in the world. So we've got all those general influences, and even if we're feeling quite comfortable ourselves, we're seeing these images on the telly, we're walking past people lying homeless on the streets, we're coming across people begging for money, we're seeing baskets in the trolleys in the supermarket asking us for food for people. There's no escape, and even if you don't give anything, you can feel wounded, because it's upsetting to think of people, you know, with nothing. And then, of course, with COP and everything else, we're very much aware of all the environmental factors. I don't need to go into them, do I? But, you know, we can tell from our own spring and summer, well, spring and winter, it's crazy, the seasons. We have a week of sun, a week of frost, we have snow, we have cold winds, etc., etc. Socially, things are so different now. We used to be in community, we used to be with the family, an extended family, we used to maybe live in a village where we knew everyone. Now we may not know our next door neighbours, we may be stuck in a high-rise flat, just looking down on the scene. And then if you think of other things like the political situation, chaos there, culturally, so many things happening, and then the explosion in the media, all those influence, all those pictures, all those images, encouraging us to spend, encouraging us to look slim and trim or beautiful or whatever it may be, encouraging us to get hair transplants, in my case. So these things can distract us, these things can pull us down because they're so prevalent. And then, of course, we've got war and conflict, not just in Ukraine, but in lots of parts of the world. And then, you know, the elephant in the room, which has been mentioned once or twice now, nuclear weapons. You know, with apparently President Putin at one stage talking about or thinking about using nuclear weapons. So there's a general feeling of things falling apart. So, you know, not surprisingly, we can feel overwhelmed, We withdraw. We've had COVID as well, of course. We feel isolated, alienated, disconnected, and insecure. So these are all influences, and we can either buy into those influences and pull ourselves down, or we can resist those influences and even overcome those influences, which is really what we need to do in an ideal world, at least. So we've got these general external influences, and then we've got our own personal external influences, the situations we're in, the circumstances that we're in. And again, I just mentioned a few of them here, but, you know, health issues, either my own or other people's, can hugely debilitate you if you take it in the wrong way, you know. Like the head of Formula One, I forget his name now, just noticed in the paper the other day there was an inquest on him. He had cancer, terminal cancer, and couldn't face it and shot himself. He became a suicide statistic. Health issues can cause us lots of worry, lots of stress, if we deal with them in a negative way, if we don't see them as an opportunity. Likewise, relationships, you know, 40% of marriages end in divorce. And even those who are married, they can have all sorts of challenges, not only with their partner, but the kids growing up, the neighbours, the in-laws. There's often lots of different conflicts. Financial hardship, of course, we've all had our bills in. Our electricity is going to go up, you know, by 50%, or the fuel bills are. Again, that can drag you down, that can worry you. Where's it all going to end? How am I going to manage? I get stressed, I get anxious, I'm projecting into the future. You know, how am I going to afford to live here? How am I going to do X, Y, or Z? These are huge issues, you know. Housing issues. So many people now, you know, are homeless or living in hotel rooms with their children, wanting to buy their own home but can't afford it, trapped in rented accommodation. Carer responsibilities, again, more and more pressure is being put on carers. There's less support out there, and you're caring for somebody who is disabled or has dementia or has other, you know, very serious physical challenges, and it's down to me to deal with all of that. I, the soul in this body, in this situation. Where do I go? Who do I turn to? If we're not careful, we can collapse under these sorts of influences. And then a big one for a lot of people is the death of a loved one. Now, I think it's important to make a distinction between grief and depression. Grief is a perfectly normal and natural response to having a loss in one's life. And of course, the more you've invested in that person, the more you've spent time with them, the more you've loved them and engaged with them, then the greater that loss will be. And you will feel sad, you will want to grieve. That is not the same as being depressed. And I think we need to make that distinction. And again, another distinction is between depression and sadness. Sadness can be as a normal, natural state. Again, I feel sad about X, Y, or Z. I feel sad about the homeless. I don't have to go down into depression. Depression is more about me and how I feel about myself, more about, yes, those inner feelings that I have about me, and maybe blaming myself for all these other things which are going on in the world. I feel responsible for everything and everyone. And so I can't cope with all of that, and I just go down the hole. So these are influences. So as we're going through these, maybe, you know, write down what are the influences on you as a soul. And the third one are internal influences. And these really are the most important. As I said before, if you're strong inside, you can face and deal with anything. So all those external influences become challenges, they become opportunities if you're strong inside. But many of us are not strong inside, we're weak. As I said before, if you're strong inside, you can face and deal with anything. So all those external influences become challenges, they become opportunities if you're strong inside. But many of us are not strong inside, we're weak. And that's for various reasons, actually. And I'm aware of, there isn't too much time left. I need to find the time. Can't see it on my laptop now. I haven't got my mobile. Let me get my mobile, so excuse me. Yeah, sorry, 10 minutes left. Yes, so these are the internal influences. And again, make a note of any which apply to you, because these are going to leave you feeling unable to cope, and maybe getting stressed, maybe getting anxious, maybe getting depressed. Your personality type. You know, there's the type personality, want to be in control, everything's black and white, do as I say, and an A-type personality, if they're challenged in any way, completely throws them off course because they find it hard to cope with, because they've got to be in control, they've got to be in charge, and you've got to do as you're told. B-type person is more easygoing, maybe too much so sometimes, easy come, easy go, what's your worry, we'll sort it all out in the end, you know. And this can be, again, you know, is connected with our self-identity. How do I see myself? If I see myself in a limited way, if I see myself only in terms of my rules or in terms of my possessions or in terms of my beliefs, my identity is based on, you know, being male, being older, being educated, or whatever it may be, that identity could easily get threatened, you know, and all those external things change over time. You know, it's not so easy for me to get up and down the stairs anymore. That could threaten my image of myself as a perfectly fit and healthy man, sort of thing, you know. So yes, if our identity is challenged, if we have a very fragile identity, like a little shell protecting us, but underneath there's goo, as it were, then, you know, it's going to have an impact on us, isn't it? So we have to go deep inside. What's my attitude like? My attitude to life is going to make a big difference. If it's a negative attitude, I'm going to be catastrophizing. I'm only going to be seeing the worst in every situation. If I have a positive attitude, I mean, it's going to be more of a can do. We'll survive. We'll get through this. They're two very different attitudes. And it's up to me to check on this. What is my attitude? How can I change it? How can I shift from, you know, negative to positive? And these things which, you know, you need to work out for yourself. Then there are the beliefs. You know, quite often we have life-limiting beliefs which really tie us down and tie us up. Hey, that's a good expression too. Tie us down and tie us up. You know, if I believe school days are the best days of my life, then I've written off the rest of my life, haven't I? If I believe happiness never lasts, I wouldn't even bother looking for it. So what's going on in here? How am I seeing the world? How am I thinking about the world? How am I responding to the world? It's all to do with me and what's going on in here. Low self-esteem. We've talked about that already. The guilt and shame. Guilt about things that I've done. That needs looking at, doesn't it? So maybe releasing the guilt by forgiving myself. Shame, that's more to do with who I am rather than what I've done. Shame can be a big, deep stain which penetrates right inside. And you feel totally ashamed even to be alive. So shame needs facing, shame needs replacing, shame needs washing out of our subconscious. And we'll find ways of doing this, in the next couple of sessions. And then there are things like anger, lust, greed, ego, and attachment. These are called spiritual diseases. These are internal states of mind or states of being to some extent, which actually trap the soul. So the soul is not able to respond in a positive way, in a happy way, in a peaceful way. So look how greed takes people over, makes them mean, and then their friends don't want to know them. The ego of I'm the best, you're rubbish. It's not going to endear you to anybody. Or if you're attached and clinging on to somebody desperately, not wanting to lose them, what will happen? You'll push them away. They'll reject you, and then you'll feel all those feelings which you didn't want to have in the first place, because they're deep inside. Those all are unfulfilled emotional needs, and these actually are connected to adverse childhood experiences. Now, when I was doing the research for this book, I came across this, adverse childhood experiences, or ACE for short, and personally, I found it mind-blowing. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about it. So here we go. They've done research in America, and they asked, I think, 1,700 people who were meant to be taking part in an obesity reduction program. They were meant to be dieting and things like that. And they noticed that a lot of the people, although they said they wanted to lose weight, didn't actually turn up. And they were wondering what's going on here. We're offering them this free program, they're not coming. And then they started to investigate why, and found out there were all sorts of feelings, like we've already mentioned, the guilt and the shame, the low self-esteem and things like that. And they thought, well, I wonder where all this is coming from. And then they came up with a questionnaire, and then they started asking people about their childhood. Very interesting. And they discovered, asking them questions about had they ever been physically abused, in other words, hit excessively, punished, smacked, or whatever. Emotionally abused, told they're no good, rubbish. Sexually abused. And then they asked them, did you ever experience any neglect, either physical neglect, people sort of not feeding you or whatever it might be, or emotional neglect, people not interested in you, not validating you and things like that. And then they asked people about their household. Any mental illness in the household? Anyone who's been incarcerated? Anyone been in a situation where the mother has been treated violently? Any substance abuse in the house? Any divorce in the child's background? And when they put all these things together, they discovered, and this is maybe something you could do now, just tick which of these different boxes apply to your childhood. They discovered if people had 4 or more of those different experiences in their childhood, then they were much more likely to suffer from these things. Lack of physical activity, increased smoking, alcoholism, drug use, missing work. Those are behaviors. Then physically and mentally, severe obesity, diabetes, depression, which obviously is one of the key things we're interested in, suicide attempts, sexually transmitted diseases, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, broken bones. All these things are manifesting years later because of the adverse childhood experiences. And there's a little bit here in terms of suicide, which actually, you know, is a big thing. Sorry, I lost my place. Yeah, I mean, this one is quite interesting. Compared to an ACE score of 0, having 4 adverse childhood experiences was associated with a 7-fold increase in alcoholism, a doubling of the risk of being diagnosed with cancer, 4-fold increase in emphysema, and an ACE score of 6 was associated with a 30-fold increase in attempted suicide. 30-fold if you had 6 of those adverse childhood experiences. So obviously those experiences have had a profound effect on what we would say is the soul. So you've come into this world as a happy soul and you're wanting to have a good life, and then all these sorts of experiences happen. And then this has an impact on everything else, because when those things happen, it means a lot of our primary needs as children and as babies have not been met. So, you know, if you've had those adverse experiences, or some of them, you're not going to feel valued, you're not going to feel safe, you're not going to feel important, you're not going to feel cared for. You're not going to feel you've been seen or heard or accepted or appreciated or acknowledged. So you're on a hiding to nothing. You feel almost, well, I felt invisible because I had at least 4 of those. No respect, no encouragement, not feeling useful, no feeling of belonging, not treated honestly, not treated fairly, not trusted or loved or held. You know, a lot of those things have gone on in your life at that early age. They set the pattern, which is going to be expressed through all your relationships, where you're going to be wanting these things from people outside you to compensate for what you didn't get as a child. So this is quite deep stuff, isn't it? Now, if you're looking outside of yourself for any of these things, you're always going to be dependent on other people, and you're always going to be at risk of losing their approval or their support, and then you're going to feel very insecure, very anxious, very stressed and depressed. So this comes from a book by someone called Mike Fisher called Beating Anger. Whenever we feel angry or hurt or afraid, we can be sure that our primary need is not being met, either by ourselves or others. And really, it's triggering off a memory from the past. I wasn't respected as a kid, and this person is reminding me of that because they're not, you know, respecting me now. So again, part of this whole spiritual perspective is to go within and recognize it's all about me and what's happened to me and what's going on inside me, what I've experienced as a soul, and how that has covered over all my goodness, covered over my natural hope, covered over my natural love, my natural peace. And this 4-step process, which actually will be starting, I think, going through step 2 and 3 next week, because time is up almost. I'm sorry. I hope this is helpful. Yeah, maybe I'll stop there actually. I'll stop the sharing. And yes, thank you. I couldn't see the direct message, Nina, about winding up. Will a copy of the slides be available? Yes, it will be. In fact, if you do the whole course, the 3 sessions, then you can email for a free copy of the PDF of the book. Otherwise, you can buy it on Amazon, or you can download it as a Kindle book, and there is that website to go to. So what I've done, I think, I hope anyway, I've clarified the situation. I've tried to give some perspective on all the influences on us which have an impact both externally and internally. Let's finish with a minute of silence. Okay, so just sit there peacefully, do the slow, deep, gentle breathing. Come into the moment. Remember who you really are. A powerful soul, a positive soul, a peaceful soul. Who has the strength within to overcome all the external influences and internal influences which have had an impact on me during my time on this earth. I can survive, and in fact, I can thrive, and I will. Because I'm going to use my awareness. I'm going to tap into my natural wisdom. I'm going to listen to my intuition. And I'm going to return to a state of happiness, because that is who I am. I am a happy, joyful being.